Hello everybody, Justin from Playing Board Games here, and today I have a list video of the 10 best investigators for new players. I made this video in the past, but here's an updated version for 2026. This list is going to cover 10 investigator recommendations for new players. Choosing an investigator can be daunting, and each investigator brings their own positive, negatives, and complexity to the table, so I'm going to present to you 2 investigator recommendations for each class. One recommendation will be from the Evergreen Investigator Pool, Core 2026 and Evergreen Starter Decks, the intended investigators to stay in print for the foreseeable future, and one recommendation will be from the Legacy Pool. While I know not everyone has access to Legacy anymore, these are good recommendations if you do have these investigators in your collection. Let's do this. We're going to go by class order, and I'm going to do the new investigator from current, the Core 2026 and Evergreen, and then the Legacy investigator to go with it. So, starting off first, we got Tommy Muldoon, the Evergreen starter. 3/3/4/2/9/6. As an action, spend 1 resource or discard a firearm asset you control from play. Playing a firearm asset from your hand, paying its cost, it enters play with 2 additional ammo on it. His deck building is Guardian cards 0 to 5 and neutral cards 0 to 5. So this is one of the starter deck investigators, which means they are only mono Guardian deck building. Has very easy deck building. Guardian only means you have a very simple pool to build with. This is one of the positives of Tommy. This allows you to just focus on just what you need to be doing, and Tommy's ability provides an easy direction for following for deck building. So Tommy cares about firearms. You want to be putting firearm assets into your deck. Your ability says, hey, I should be playing firearms and maybe getting more usage out of them. So it's like giving you a direction and then a payoff for that direction. It's very easy to kind of put the 2 and 2 together. This works really well with his signature Becky, which is a firearm. Funnily enough, takes up 2 hand slots as an action, spend 1 ammo to fight. You get +2 fist and deal +1 damage for this attack. And as a reaction, when you trigger the above action ability, Exhaust Becky, this attack ignores the aloof and retaliate keywords. So just a very nice firearm that gives Tommy another thing that's unique to him and kind of just further pushes this like firearm build for him. He also has a good stat line and health pools, then they provide good survivability. 9/6, so 9 physical damage, 6 mental damage are good numbers. Not as strong as he has the extra thing in the meat damage, like he has extra health, so he's like some good survivability there. He also has a pretty good willpower stat. The 3 brain allows him to kind of just like tank the mythos phase a little bit better. As a whole, Tommy is simple, no nonsense, and he just gets the job done. He has a very easy kind of like direction to take, and I think that he is less punishing than Daniela, who is from the Core 2026. I think he's just kind of like, of the 2 Guardians in the Core, and like in the Evergreen pool, I think he just does the job really well. On to his negatives. Monoclass deck building makes the makes the weaknesses of the class more apparent. So he is a Guardian, so he carries with him the weaknesses of the Guardian class, right? So it's like, its cards are expensive, economy might be a little bit harder to find, card draw can be a little bit tighter. He can't supplement these weaknesses with his like off class, because he's only mono Guardian, so it's just one of those things that just makes him ultimately just a little weaker in that regard. Gun-based combat can cause more feel bads. It feels bad to fail tests when you're using just like anything, but when you have to use like a firearm that has limited ammo, it can feel just a little bit worse. So it's like just something to be aware of with firearm-based combat. It can kind of feel more bad than other combats. Loose cannon, his weakness, can be hard to play around for a new player. Loose cannon, you must either discard each firearm asset you control or lose 5 resources. Not playing around this card can be an absolute bomb just coming out of your deck, and I think that as a newer player you might forget about your signature and basic weaknesses, so just something to keep in mind if someone wants to play a Guardian, then just like kind of really hammer home the risk that Loose Cannon provides. On the complexities, these are kind of just like some simple pieces of things to be aware of if you want to like teach new players. This is less for you as a new player, more if you're teaching a new player, but enemy management can be daunting. Figuring out like how to kill enemies and not being scared of like taking enemies head on is just like a really, really tough thing to kind of just like put together. And of course, Tommy has some extra difficulty in regards to resource management. So you might want to be able to give your new players, or as a new player yourself, try to find as many ways to control your resource generation as possible. Up next, we got Zoe Samaras from Dunwich Legacy. She is our legacy recommendation here, and I believe she was our legacy recommendation in our previous video. We did this as well. 4-2-4-2 for the stat line, 9-6, so very similar to Tommy Muldoon. As a reaction, after after you become engaged with an enemy, gain 1 resource. Her deck building is Guardian 0-5, Neutral 0-5, and up to 5 level 0 cards from any other class. Zoe has mostly straightforward deck building. She's essentially Mono Guardian like Tommy Muldoon, except for those 5 splash cards, which I'm going to be touching on later in the negatives, because the deck building for Zoe is both a positive and a negative. The Mono Guardian is very easy and very easy to understand, but like the Dunwich building, like the 5 level 0 classes, can be a little bit daunting. Zoe's ability teaches new players that engaging enemies is a good thing. When I talked about earlier, and I'm going to talk about later in this, about enemy management can be daunting for new players, a big part of that is that they are scared to deal with enemies. And one thing that I'm personally a big fan for Zoe Samaras is that she teaches you as a player that you want to actively seek out and engage enemies. She has an ability that when you engage an enemy, you get rewarded. So it's kind of like teaching you as a player that engaging enemies is a good thing to do. And I really like the lesson that she teaches for new players. Zoe has a good resource generation, meaning smoother play in the scenario. This is different than Tommy Muldoon, who we were just talking about. Tommy Muldoon has to spend resources for ability. Zoe gains resources from her ability, which means that she is just more likely to have resources in her pocket, which is going to just smooth out the game as you are playing. The negative, the Dunwich deck building can be daunting. I recommend if you are playing with a new player, have recommendations available to them for the level 0 cards. Maybe just give them a batch to choose from and be like, hey, these are cards, this is why you might want to consider them, yada yada yada. If you are the new player looking to build a Zoe deck, I would consider looking for decks on Arkham Build or Arkham DB for recommendations for what Zoe splash cards could be, or on this channel we have a variety of Zoe decks that you could look into as well. Smite the Wicked, Zoe's signature weakness can be really swinging during a scenario and can also lead to a mental trauma spiral. Smite the Wicked is a revelation, discard cards at the top of the encounter deck until an enemy is discarded. Attach Smite the Wicked to that enemy and spawn at the location farthest from you. Forced, when the game ends, if attached enemies in play, you suffer 1 mental trauma. This can be shocking to a new player, how this can just come out of nowhere. It brings an enemy, that enemy's far away, and if you can't kill that enemy, either because it's there's not enough time, or alternatively, the enemy's too big, or it's like just at the wrong time in the scenario, it can be very just shocking. So just something to... I would show them this weakness before and just be like, if there's time we can solve this, it's going to become a priority when it does, right? Like, it's just like, kind of like, lean in on them, be like, don't, like, kind of just really stress that this is a weakness that they need to be aware of, because you don't want them to fall into that mental trauma spiral where they get 1 mental trauma and then suddenly they die to horror and there's another mental trauma. It can carry a lot of baggage for a new player. Complexities, again, enemy management can be daunting for new players, and Zoe rewards aggressive play, which new players may not seek out. It's hard for new players to be aggressive because they don't understand what aggression is. They don't know what tempo is in Arkham, so they're not really going to be able to do the thing that a more enfranchised player is able to do with Zoe Samaras. So if you're playing with a new player playing Zoe, maybe lower your expectations. We have Carolyn Fern for our Evergreen starter deck here. She is a 3/5/1/3 with a reaction ability. After you heal 1 or more horror from an investigator or ally asset, discover 1 clue at your location. She has 6/9 for her health, so she is pretty good on the stat line and healing. Positives, her deck building is also Mono Seeker. Positives, Mono Seeker deck building allows for approachable deck building, very easy for new players to understand. They only have to look at one part of your binder, or alternatively, they kind of like all the cards kind of mesh with the same game plan, which in Seeker is drawing cards, getting clues, using those clues to your advantage, right? Like, it's a very easy thing to kind of just like put more of a microscope on what the class should be doing and what the investigator should be doing. Carolyn Fern gives an awesome stat line that gives clear direction to the player. You have 5 book. Your intellect is 5. Go nuts, get clues. You're not going to work that much harder to get there, and it's just like, it's a very good foundational start for you to understand what you need to be doing, which is getting clues. Being rewarded for horror healing is a good treat for new players. Players like healing. Like new players, they do. They like to, they look at damage and horror as if they have it, they're going to die, right? So it's one of those things where they actively seek it out, and I think Carolyn Fern was a really nice idea to kind of give the player is a little bit of a reward for a very new player play style, because like when you get a little bit more deeper in, you kind of look for other ways to mitigate horror and damage that isn't necessarily healing. But I do like that Carolyn Fern has an option to give new players a reward for horror healing, which they will actively seek out as newer players. A negative is healing is good in Carolyn, but can still be a new player trap. You can see kind of the transition here. Healing is good, but I do think that Carolyn has the risk of potentially teaching bad habits, just like how some other investigators in the past would kind of like give you an idea of the game, like the value of something that's not true to the game as a whole. Carolyn makes healing good, but that doesn't necessarily mean that healing is always good. Her playstyle rewards taking horror, which new players may find scary. There are cards that deal horror in the current pool that new players might shy away from because they're like, why would I want to take horror? That's the thing I have very little of. Being able to use, take horror as a resource is something that new players, especially new to card games, might not understand. Players who have played a lot of card games, they'll probably be a little bit more inclined to fall into this kind of thing and accept it. But with Carolyn, it's a little bit trickier for new players. Players may feel powerless when faced with an enemy in the Mythos phase. This is why there's a lot of recommendations for how to approach building a deck for new players. And I think that the new Arkham has kind of led to a style where it's more like, it's more based on flexing. So investigators are the decks are kind of more designed to deal with enemies in some way. So it's one of those things that if you're building a deck for a new player, or if you are a new player building your deck, look for those tools. Even if your intention is to get clues or to have that player get clues, maybe look for ways for them to be able to also be able to manage enemies and not be as reliant on another player to get there. So just something that you can consider if you're building a Carolyn deck or building a Carolyn deck for somebody. Complexities. Being the arbiter of tempo may lead to more losses than wins. This is a very complex sentence, but it makes sense if you played a lot of Arkham. And you'll see this especially, I see this when I play with new players. They have a different idea of what it means to get clues than a player who's more enfranchised, where they know that clues are how you win the game. The faster you get clues, the more likely you are to win the game, right? And like the quicker you win the game, the less threats you have to solve. It's kind of just like that's Arkham. Like that's how the game works. And a new player isn't aware of this. And if you lean on the new player to be the one who is deciding the tempo that you are going to be playing, you might be playing at a slower tempo than you want, which means more threats that you might not be able to, and you might not be building decks to manage those things. So just something to be aware of when it comes to a new player and playing Carolyn Fern with you, or you as a new player. You are deciding how the pace of the game is, so be aware with that with every decision you make. It's a lot. It's like, this is why it's a complexity. It's a complex thing, but it is something to be aware of. The 5-book style of play may lead to bad habits in the future, where they feel like they don't need to boost their book. And like book and fist are like two stats that are like always relevant for boosting. And something that Carolyn Fern starting at 5, she doesn't really need to do it. And I think that it could potentially lead to deck building habits in the future that they might need to learn out of. So just something that you can kind of like understand if you're playing Carolyn, or as a player teaching Carolyn also, kind of like push on them. All right, our legacy one here is Rex Murphy from Dunwich Legacy. The big man himself, 3/4/2/3/6/9 soak. As a reaction, if you succeed in a skill test by 2 or more while investigating, discover 1 clue at your location. Positives. Oh, sorry, his deck building is also Seeker and then 5 level 0 cards many class. Like Zoe, he's from Dunwich, so he has a similar deck building style. Positives. Rex's deck building is mostly mono Seeker, making it relatively simple. Like Zoe, he has the upside of being mostly Seeker with 5 splash cards, which also carries the negative that Dunwich deck building can be daunting, so have recommendations for the player. Rex has good defensive stat lines, 3 for horror, 3 for willpower, and 3 for agility, or as we call it here a PBG, 3 for brain and 3 for foot, is very, very nice. His health and sanity pools are also really damn good. Rex is very powerful. He's a very powerful investigator, but I think he's relatively fair in the hands of a new player. So even if you're an enfranchised player, you know what Rex is capable of, you can give him to a new player and they won't be able to do the same things that you do unless they might already be pro at card games, in which case you honestly can give them almost like any Seeker Investigator and they'll still probably just rock it. One thing that Bryn always says, it's a good recommendation for Rex Murphy, is just tell the players that Rex was misprinted and his ability is only once per turn. That's a good way to also just keep Rex Murphy in line. Negatives, Dunnage deck building can be daunting, have recommendations, we talked about that one. Rex's Curse can be an annoying weakness to remember to play with. It's just like a memory thing, like when players are like learning Arkham, the rules are so complex and trying to figure out how the game works, what they should be doing, how they properly assess threats that are faced before them. It can be very, very tough. And then if you throw Rex's Curse on top of it, they pass a test and they go, yay, I passed the test. You go, hold on, you're not, no, look at that Rex's Curse. Like, it can be very annoying to have to manage that. And like with Carolyn, players may feel powerless when faced with an enemy in the Mythos phase. Complexities, again, being the arbiter of tempo can lead to more losses than wins. Same sort of things from the Carolyn point there. And be aware that you're playing with a new player playing Rex, which means that they are a new player playing Rex. Not only are they arbiter of the tempo, they might be going into slower tempo, but they're not playing Rex to the level that you might be playing Rex with as a kind of more enfranchised player. So just something to keep in mind. All right, on to the Rogue class here. We have Andre Patel for our Evergreen starter. 2-3-2-5 is a reaction. After you succeeded a skill test by 2 or more during your turn, you may take an additional action this turn, limit once per round. Deck building is Rogue card 0 to 5 and neutral 0 to 5. So, like how we talked with some of the previous in the past with Tommy and Carolyn, Andre's mono rogue. His deck building is mono class, which allows for more approachable deck building. Very easy to understand for deck building. You kind of know what the class is doing, and Andre kind of gives you some advice on his ability. Andre is probably the best introduction to rogue style of play. We're going to be talking a bit more about this in the complexities and all this kind of stuff, but Rogue is a tricky class. They're not as straightforward as the Guardian class or the Seeker class. Actually, so for example, we're going to talk about the Rogue class, the Mystic class, and the Survivor class. They all are just inherently more complicated than the Guardian and Seeker class. And Andre is probably the best introduction to this style of play for the Rogues because he has high agility, high foot, so it's like 5 foot is really nice. The 7/8 soak is very survivable. He has 2 brains, so it's like that idea where Rogues are weaker on the defensive side of things for like mentally, but he's still like very well put together. His ability is also just like easy to understand. I want to pass a skill test generally, but Andre is asking me to succeed by 2 or more, and I get rewarded with an additional action. So it's kind of like one of those things where rogues are kind of a blank canvas, and it can be hard to kind of like paint on that canvas when you don't understand what you should be doing. But Andre does a really good job of kind of like giving you the most paint by numbers style of most of the rogues that exist. And still giving you kind of that rogue feel that rogue players really love. So if you feel like your new player likes that kind of style of play, I think it's hard to go wrong with Andre, especially with the cards in his set. Like, he has Lockpicks, he has Thieves' Kit, he has Polish Cane, right? Like, Polish Cane, it's all good. Like, he has a lot of tools to here that really can make his ability actually able to trigger. More actions means less pressure on a new player, so if they get more actions during their turn, they'll feel less like their actions are make or break in terms of winning the scenario. Negatives here, players will need to learn how to routinely succeed by 2. I think when you play a lot of Arkham, you can generally agree that Andre's ability is one that you want to trigger every turn. New players might not know how to do that, and I think that there is a big learning experience on how to get there consistently. I think there are cards that make it more obvious. Again, Lockpicks, Polished Cane. Those work together, I think, really well to kind of establish how you do it. But players might need to then learn how to do that without those cards if they're not in their opening hand and all that kind of thing. 4 total signatures. He has Know the Exit, Know the Line, Know the Scene, and Weight of the World will lead to some inconsistent opening draws. This might sound like I'm describing a very complicated thing, but it's really not complicated when you kind of just like narrow it down to the feeling of your opening hand, right? Where a good opening hand feels like you're immediately making progress on the game, and a bad opening hand won't. So it's kind of like less where I'm saying like inconsistent opening draws. The players might not know their draw is inconsistent, but they'll feel their draw is inconsistent. Players may feel powerless if one of their rogue tools and tricks. As we look at Andre's stat line, his stat line is kind of poop outside of that 5 agility, right? Like the 3 book is manageable, but you can't use that to investigate. Rogues, like the classes we're going to be talking about for the rest of the video, need other tools to hit these metrics, and Rogue is kind of a little bit more powerless without them, and new players might not be aware of how to dig out of that hole. This goes into the complexity where rogues are a complicated class with a demanding play style, where they're told to assemble a combo, and when that combo is working, they'll be able to get ahead of the game, but how's a new player going to figure out the pieces for the combo that really make that work? That's one thing why I really like about Andre, because his ability is kind of a payoff to this very basic idea of the rogue combo machine. So just something for consideration on the complexity. And balancing Andre's weakness and ability can potentially be a lot. Taking horror, not having the protection, managing the succeed by 2, there's a lot of moving pieces that make Andre Patel more complex than some of the other investigators that we have here. For our legacy one, we got Michael McGlenn from the Drowned City, 315395. So a little bit weak mentally, but we'll touch on that in the negatives. As a reaction, after you spend 1 or more ammo from a firearm asset, gain 1 resource, limit once per firearm asset per round. His deck building is probably our most most complex deck building that we have here. It's rogue cards 0 to 3, neutral cards 0 to 5, cards with firearm either as their trait or their text box levels 0 to 5. However, I think that his positives outweigh his negatives and his complexities in terms of Michael McGlenn, why I had him for my recommendation here. A simple firearm playstyle is incredibly obvious from his ability. Like when we talked about Tommy Muldoon earlier, I am very inclined to choose investigators for new players that have an ability that is incredibly easy to understand what you should be doing and how you are rewarded for it, right? Where they know that when you spend ammo from a firearm, you're killing an enemy. That gives you money. It's kind of like Zoe Samaras the same sort of way, right? It gives you that kind of like, I want to shoot people, I want to kill enemies, and I'm getting rewarded for it. That's really cool. It also sometimes can give some positive interactions where they're like, ooh, wait a minute, this says limit once per firearm asset. So if I fire once with this gun and once with this gun, do I get 2 resources? And that's such a big learning moment for a new player where they can feel like a genius. They can be like, I've cracked the code, right? And I really like investigators that can do that as well for new players while not adding too much complexity on top of that. Michael's ability naturally gives resources for a smoother play experience. This is very similar to Zoe. Just having the boost to all your economy is like really nice. The 5 fist also, I don't really talk about that here, but like, again, having a fight value that is just really good means that the players can just like do their job without having to worry about spending resources to make it consistent. And I generally find that that's one of the hardest things for new players to understand, and also some franchise players, am I right? About like how do they balance their resources that they're spending in terms of cards and actual resource tokens to pass tests. Even though he has 5 horror, like 5 sanity, he's one of the best prepared investigators, like one of the best prepared rogues for the Mythos phase. He has 3 willpower and 3 foot, like those are prime numbers. You put a guts in this deck, you put in a manual dexterity, you put an unexpected courage. This is actually a very well protected rogue player for the Mythos phase. Negatives: gun-based combat can cause more feel bads, like with Tommy Muldoon. Missing with a gun hurts. Luckily with Michael McGlenn, missing with a gun hurts a little bit less. Confiscation can be absolutely crippling for new players. Confiscation is a signature weakness. Revelation: shuffle each firearm asset in your play area into your deck. If no asset was shuffled into your deck by this effect, take 1 damage and shuffle confiscation back into your deck. Very similar to loose cannon, losing all your guns can really hurt. With only 5 sanity, Michael needs some other methods to survive, so just something to keep in mind when it comes to deck building. Enemy management can be daunting for new players in complexity, and as I mentioned, unique deck building can be very hard to approach. Pull out options in advance. If you are a new player and you want to have an easier form of deck building, I recommend using Arkham.build. Fantastic website. I use it every day. It's incredible. You can look up you can go to Michael McGlenn and just build a deck through there. You can also just in the sidebar, you can put in traits firearm, and then or even like in the text box, you can put in firearm. Up at the top, you can put like game text mode. It's a lifesaver. Trust me, use it. On to the Mystics. We have Dexter Drake from the core set. 5/2/2/3, 6/8 soak. As a reaction after you play an asset, either return another non-story asset you control to your hand, or play a different asset from your hand, paying its cost. His deck building is, I think, is actually our first investigator with the 05-02 deck building, the OG deck building. Mystic cards level 0 to 5, rogue cards 0 to 2, neutral cards 0 to 5. Dexter's ability dictates a goal for deck building, playing assets. Again, I like it when you have that capability of just reading the card and being like, okay, I think I want to play an asset. They can ask what playing an asset means. They can be like, okay, so I can trigger this whenever I play this card. And you can be like, yeah, that's when you can trigger it. It just kind of teaches them about one of the modes of the game and gives them an idea of what they should be doing on their turn. So rather than being like, am I just going to play this asset because, they can be like, okay, I think I want to play this asset and then maybe play this asset, or like compress actions and play an additional asset. Like, it's very easy to understand and take advantage of. Dexter also has very strong defensive stats, which means Dexter can handle the Mythos phase very well. 5 willpower, 3 agility is nothing to like hate. It's nothing to dislike there. It's really good. It's like, again, with Michael McGlenn, you put like a manual dex and a guts in this deck, and you're golden. You just like won't falter as like throughout the scenario. It's just really good defensive stats. The similarity of Mystic assets gives new player an easier understanding. So it's like one of those things where, again, Dexter is being like, hey, you're going to be playing through assets. You're going to look for these assets to kind of do your thing, right? Like, there's the basic action to investigate, but you as a Mystic, you are not doing that. You're looking for this to investigate. Likewise with fighting, you're going to look for this card to fight with, right? So it kind of just gives them, I am doing this through this, and then in the future, you can kind of teach them more about the basics and other things to do that as well. And they'll also have kind of the foundational knowledge that assets can do actions, and then maybe that's something they can explore in their class as well. From Mystic to Rogue, you'll understand lockpicks a little bit better. Negatives. Without assets, new players will have a hard time accomplishing anything. This is probably the biggest weakness of the Mystic class as a whole, where they need the aforementioned assets and the positives to actually get things done. Without it, Dexter is only a 2 for book and a 2 for fist. Like, that's just a nightmare for a new player to try to manage. Honestly, that's a nightmare for an enfranchised player to manage, right? So, like, Mystics are so reliant on their assets that without them, it's hard to accomplish anything. Dexter's ability provides evaluation that can be overwhelming. You as a player, as an enfranchised player, maybe watching a new player play, or you as a new player might not know what to do, and just like try things out is kind of my advice. It can be very overwhelming. You're not going to get it perfect. You're not going to like nail it every time. Just like honestly keep it simple. If it has charges and it's empty, bounce it to your hand. If you don't have something that has charges that's empty you want to bounce, just play another asset. It's like one of those things where it can be hard to see the value, so just like try things out, see what works. And if you're watching a new player play, don't necessarily dictate that they should bounce that. Just let it happen and give advice between scenarios. Dexter's weakness will teach about slots in an unforgiving way. Dexter's weakness is the Necronomicon, the Drake translation. It takes up the Arcane slot, which means if you have 2 Arcane assets in play, it's going to kick something else out. So just something to be aware of that new players might not know, and it's something you want to run by, where it's like, here's Second Sight, here's Cosmic Flame. Ideally, you want both of these in play, but something to be aware of, the Necronomicon over here, this will knock one of those out because you only have 2 Arcane slots. Just kind of like really hammer that home. Complexities. Mystic bring their own issues with charge management. This is reduced slightly by Second Sight and Cosmic Flame, but just something to be aware of. They have limited uses. They're inherently attached to their firearm like assets, where it's like a limited number of uses on them. And then Mystics are inherently flexible, which has its own pros and cons. This is especially true when a new player might want to investigate but not have their investigate asset and only have their fight asset, and that might feel a little bit bad. Our Legacy Mystic recommendation is Jacqueline Fine. She is from the starter decks, 5/3/2/2, 6/9 for the health and sanity. As a reaction, when an investigator location would reveal any number of chaos tokens, reveal 2 additional tokens. Of the revealed tokens, choose and cancel 2 non-autofill tokens or 1 autofill token. Limit once per round. Deck building is Mystic card 0 to 5. So, like the previous mono class investigators before this, mono Mystic deck building is very approachable. Very easy for new players to understand. They see the card pools, they can kind of put together what everything is. The big thing about why Jacqueline is such a good recommendation for new players is her ability. So we're going to be focusing that for her 2 major positives here. The ability to increase odds during tests will be more forgiving for new players. They're going to feel more control, and they'll be able to actually feel more confident in their ability to pass tests because they're pulling more tokens. It's also going to naturally kind of teach them more about token manipulation and token odds, and they'll have a little bit more control over that. Additionally, new players love helping other players. They like to feel like they are impacting the game, and the most common and easiest way to feel an impact on the game is if they are helping other players in the game. So Jacqueline Fine being able to use her ability on other investigators is really good for new players because they will feel like they are actually actively impacting the game in a way that they understand is helpful. So I really think Jacqueline Fine deserves the recommendation for that alone. I think it's just such a huge piece of why she is such a good investigator for new players. Negatives, players may feel overwhelmed knowing when to use Jacqueline's ability, and honestly, you'll probably find them using it more on you than on them if you're playing with them. So it's one of those things that you can kind of just be like, ask them before, being like, if they're thinking about it, being like, are you thinking of using Jacqueline's ability? And if they say yeah, you can be like, this could be a good test to do it on because of this. Or you know what, this one doesn't have that much of a downside. Or you can be like, hey, you're using charges on this. This is a good time to kind of protect it. I think that this is one of those things where you don't dictate when to use Jacqueline's ability, but rather you should kind of just like lead when you feel like they might be thinking on it, being like, this is a consideration for this reason, but not necessarily necessary for this reason. Like, it's just one of those things. It's like, yeah, you're using charges, but you're also just like investigating a location, right? Like, do we need these right now? Or like when the Mythos phase pops up, it's like, are you scared of, you can ask them, are you scared of failing this test? And you say, yeah. And they say, yeah. You can be like, okay, then this is a good time to maybe consider using the ability, right? It's one of those things where, like, again, if they're always using it on you, you can be like, you should, like, I appreciate it. You can also try using it on your own. Like, I know you might not know when to use it, but like, you could definitely use that there. Like, and be like, again, if you're a new player and you're wondering, when should I use it? If you're spending charges, that's a good time to use it, right? Like if there's like resources being put in, whether it be cards being committed, uses on a card, Jacqueline's ability becomes much more impactful than when you're just using it on like a basic investigate. Without assets, new players will have a hard time accomplishing anything. This goes to the Mystic problem we just talked about. And then Jacqueline is quite weak on the agility and health side of things. Only 2 foot is a little bit spooky. Like, she can use her ability for it, but honestly, most of the time, you're going to not get the token you want. You're going to probably resolve like a -1 when that's all done. So just something to be aware of for Jacqueline, like a manual dexterity and an unexpected courage with her ability can go a long way. And the complexities are the same as the Dexter one, so I'm not going to go over them just like in detail, but just charge management is tough, and inherently flexible is also kind of tough for new players to understand what they should be doing when as the game is going. That can be very overwhelming. All right. On to our last 2 investigators here for the Evergreen starters from Miguel de la Cruz for the core in 2026 Evergreen. 3/2/3/4, 8/8 soak. Wow, he is so much. You may take an additional action during your turn, which may only be used to play an event. His deck building is Survivor 0 to 5, so again, very straightforward. Mono Survivor deck building is more approachable for all the reasons that we talked about, all the other investigators that have mono class deck building. Miguel is incredibly tanky. This is, I think, a huge boon for Miguel for new players, is that he is just an incredibly tanky investigator. He has 8 health, 8 sanity, and not to mention that his knapsack, his signature card, has 2 health soak on it. Not to mention he's from the Survivor class. Survivor classes don't really die because they have so many cards that can heal or soak. So the new player will have, like, they'll feel very safe, and they'll have a lot of room to work with, and they might feel less pressure that they're going to die. is also the defensive stats, right? 3 brain, 4 foot. Those are really nice. An extra action for events is very easy to understand. This goes down to even the most basic action that you can have. Just play an emergency cache for your extra action each turn is very easy for new players to understand and want to do. And I think that Miguel is the best survivor that we have here. I think that survivors are inherently a complicated class. Like, I think, like, compared to the other one in the core and Evergreen, like compared to Isabel Barnes, Miguel is like light years simpler than that. He has a very simple play style, just like when you look at just his Investigator card. Negatives. Lower offensive stats, and by this I mean the 2 book and the 3 fist, may lead to confusion on how to manage. Survivors are not straightforward. They're very roguey, where it's like the cards that they have, like they're basically like rogues assemble a combo to take advantage of the game. Survivors just kind of like use what they got and like spend their resources and just like bring those resources back, right? So it's kind of like a very similar theory for how that works. And it's just can be very daunting for new players to kind of just manage that. It's one of those things where there's like tools to help you pass if you would fail. So I think Survivor has that kind of nicer kind of beat to it. But it's one of those things where it's something that I think as enfranchised Survivor players, we might not be able to see in the same way a new player will. Feline Hybrid, Miguel's weakness, is a very tough weakness to understand and solve. It's a 3/2/3 enemy, so it hits for 1 and 1, and it's immune to player card effects. What does that mean? What does it mean? He's immune to player card effects. So you can't use like item assets, you can't use like weapon assets to fight him. You can't like deal damage in other ways. You basically just have to like fight this guy as is. There are a few exceptions that I'm not going to get into here, but it just really shows just how complicated he is. Well, also the elusive kind of just comes in with there as well. Along with Prey Only, there's a lot of like kind of just words on this guy that make him a little bit more complicated. But luckily, this is a weakness that you as a group could solve together, and then it might take a lot of pressure off the player playing Miguel. Finally, while Miguel doesn't like actually have much trap synergy outside of his Elder Sign effect, he is from like, it's kind of like one of those things where it naturally kind of falls into tricks and traps because of his Elder Sign. Traps are in the higher complexity compared to other archetypes because they attach to locations. They're always in play. Just something to kind of just be aware of and keep in mind. Complexities. Survivors demand resources in the way that other classes don't. This was I was talking about how the fact that like Survivors are not just like, I put my card into play and I'm going to use that for the rest of the scenario, right? Or it's like, or like the Seekers where they're like, I have 5 books, so I'm just going to investigate. Anytime a Survivor wants to investigate, they are first faced with a question, which is how? And a Survivor player can potentially solve that in a variety of ways, but new players may not know the best way to solve that, to answer that question. And then like the Mystics, Survivors are inherently flexible, which has its own pros and cons. Last Investigator here for our legacy is Ashcan Pete from Dunwich Legacy. 4/2/2/3, you begin the game with Duke in play. As a Lightning Bolt, discard a card from your hand, ready an asset you control, limit once per round. 6/5 for the soak. His deck building is Survivor 0-5, and up to 5 level 0 cards from any other class. He's from the Dunwich Legacy, like how Zoe and Rex were earlier in this video. Duke is a very crucial asset here. It begins the game with Duke in play. As an action, exhaust Duke, fight. You get to attack with a base fist skill of 4, and this attack deals +1 damage. As an action, exhaust Duke investigates. You may investigate with a base book of 4, and you may move to a connecting location immediately before investigating with this effect. And it is a 2/3 soak to kind of give Ashcan Pete a total of 8/8, but it doesn't really feel it because you don't want Duke to die. So he's really kind of just a 7/7 when it's all said and done. All right, that's the important thing. We have a Duke in play. We have a dog. That's kind of the vibe here. Ashcan's deck building is mostly Mono Survivor, making it relatively simple. Like Zoe, like Rex, mostly Mono Survivor, but it has that negative. Dunwich deck building can be daunting, have recommendations set out, or again, look at decks online, or even ask in communities, or even just comment below this video and maybe I'll be able to kind of give you some general good level 0 recommendations. Duke provides a very simple gameplay loop to follow. With this one, it's just like you look at Duke, and you're like, okay, so I have 2 book and 2 fist. But with Duke, I get to do these at 4. So that is what I want to try to do. But I can only use Duke once per turn. But then you look at this next part where it's like, oh, I can discard a card from my hand to ready an asset I control, right? it's one of those things where, okay, then I can use Duke twice. And kind of like, oh, that's the game plan. I use Duke, ready Duke, use Duke. And that's how I'm going to take advantage of the game. It kind of answers that how, that's the complexity. And the answer is, oh, Duke is how I solve this question. So that's really, really nice for have. And also Duke's a dog. People like dogs. So like just having Duke can be like, okay, this is my good boy. He's my loyal hound. He's going to work together with me to get through this. We're going to get through this together. And I think it's a very nice little thing that a new player can kind of just like attach themselves to. Ashcan Pete has good defensive stats, which provide Ashcan with good survivability, 4 willpower, 3 agility. It's really nice. Survivors also have a lot of survivability. They're survivors after all, so it's just like a really nice combination all put together to give Ashcan Pete a really good like defensive position for new players playing Arkham. On to the negatives. Beyond the deck building, we have players may have a hard time discarding cards to use Ashcan's ability. They might look at those cards and be like, just look at them all and being like, so I want to discard a card, but I don't know what card to discard, so what the hell do I do, right? And that is hard, even for enfranchised players, to know what card to discard. So it's one thing that you can like look for cards that like reward you for being reward you when they are discarded, or alternatively cards that like can maybe kind of just give like a more signpost like, hey, discard me, or find like other ways to make discarding more valuable. So then a player can look at a card and be like, I don't want to look at this card anymore. I want to ready Duke and like gain a resource, like from Lawrence Carlisle, right? So like there's those things that you can kind of like soften the blow for that, or even just be like, come through and be like, at the start of it being like, these are the cards you want to discard if you see them, but otherwise generally Duke is strong enough that you can kind of discard most things, and then even flag like, these are the cards you probably never want to discard, and instead you probably want to play these cards. Kind of like flag stuff like that. And without Duke, players may find it hard to contribute, because again, survivors ask the question, how are you investigating? And Duke answers that question, but without Duke, how do you do it? Like if he's already exhausted and you have no cards to discard, how are you impacting the game? And the new players might not know exactly how to solve that question, and then ultimately might feel like they're not contributing and then start having a bad time. Because really, what Arkham is all about as a new player is feeling like you're impacting the game and you're not dragging other players down. And I think that the best investigators offer this kind of position of, how can I drag down the team, or at least feel like I'm dragging down the team the least? And the goal, I think, for any recommendation for a new investigator, for a new player, is the ones that are most simple and consistent in how they impact the game and how they feel like they are supporting the table. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this list video, and I hope you found it helpful. I enjoyed talking about these investigators for the last 41 minutes. If you want to support the channel, you can like, comment, subscribe. I'd love to hear your thoughts on your favorite investigators for new players. If you want to go above and beyond, you can join our Patreon to join all the names here, or you can join a YouTube member. Everything is down in the video description. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Have a good one. And as always, GG's.